Please welcome to the stage Block Chief Legal Officer Chrysty Esperanza, Spotify General Counsel Kevan Choset, and Runway General Counsel Kathleen Haji.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Following one Kathleen with another. My name is Kathleen Haji. I'm the General Counsel at Runway. In other words, I'm the company's top lawyer. I'm very excited to be speaking here today with Chrysty and Kevan, and I'll let them introduce themselves in a moment. But a bit about me, I started nearly 3 years ago as the founding member of the legal team. And in the past 3 years, I have had quite the front row seat in watching legal teams at other companies and even our own company grapple with and work through really interesting questions about AI adoption by their companies. And at the risk of coming in too hot with too many legal puns too early, the verdict is in. Trying to optimize to get rid of risk isn't really working. And what really sophisticated business-forward legal leaders and executives are doing is leaning in hard to understand the technology and help their teams decide what tools to use in the right way. And two people who've really impressed me on that score are the ones sitting up here with me on stage, Chrysty Esperanza, the Chief Legal Officer at Block, Kevan Choset, the General Counsel at Spotify. I will let the two of you introduce yourselves briefly before we jump in.
Great. Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm Chrysty Esperanza. I'm the Chief Legal Officer at Block. Block is a technology company. We build financial tools, mostly known for Square and Cash App, but they're tools that help people participate in the economy. So it's both on the seller side and then also on the consumer side as well. And I lead the legal and policy teams at Block.
Hi, I'm Kevan Choset. It's good to meet you all. I'm General Counsel of Spotify. I've been with the company for coming on 13 years. Hopefully you all know Spotify, music, podcast, audiobook streaming service. No surprise to you, as a company made up largely of software engineers, we've been using AI for a long time, both internally and in a bunch of public-facing tools that hopefully you've had a chance to use that I'm sure we'll talk about during the session.
So to set the stage, let's start with a perception check. Legal departments are often labeled as the Department of No. How do you think about your role when it comes to emerging technologies like AI? And we'll start with you, Chrysty.
Yeah, so I think even outside AI, it's really important that we're not seen as the Department of No, and I think people that come in-house want to be enablers. They don't want to be blockers. They want to be able to find ways and paths to get to yes. And there are very few instances when we say no. But rather than stopping the risk, we want to identify it. We want to figure out how to navigate around those hurdles, and then enable teams to be able to launch products and to take on initiatives that are new. And I really think with AI in particular, if you are saying no, that is a higher risk than saying yes, because you'll fall behind so fast. The technology is just compounding week over week, and as it changes from a legal perspective, we have to be able to keep up and help teams navigate it. So a lot of this comes into just leaning in, as Kevan said, and understanding those tools to make sure that we're using them both internally, but then also externally as we launch those products.
I think maybe one thing I'd add to that is that key in all of that, and again, not just for AI, but for any emerging technology, is understanding. And a key job of the legal team is to understand both the technology the company's using, but also the business strategy. And so what I found is very helpful is when the legal team can be embedded with the business to understand where the strategy is going. It allows you to get ahead of things and sort of build the guardrails to drive where the business is going to best avoid risk rather than ever being in the position to say no. So one way to avoid saying no is to get ahead of things and give the yes with caveats before the question even comes up.
So that's a perfect segue to where I wanted to go next, which is now that you've shared how you think about these things, how did that play out in real life? So walk us through what happened when your teams, your companies were first seriously evaluating generative AI tools. What was the process? And then how did it change as tools became more mainstream? And we can start with you, Kevan.
Sure. It's been a long time. So, no surprise, as I said, as a tech company, we've been using AI tools both internally and for consumers for quite a while. We weren't even necessarily using the words AI. We were, saying machine learning. We were saying large language models. But the types of tools that have come up, the way our product development cycle works in general is, folks on product and engineering teams come up with ideas, they pitch them, there's a bunch of stakeholders, legal is one of the stakeholders, and we give feedback on, what we think, what will work, what needs some certain guardrails. And, when we started looking at some of these tools, we really just use the same principles that we've used for other issues. So, as an example, there's a tool that we have called AI DJ. If you haven't used it, try it. It's on the homepage of Spotify. It's a little green circle. You'll get a voice in your ear that is it's an AI synthesized voice of a real human being who I know, who will narrate to you like a radio DJ would about what you're listening to and why you're listening to it. And so, when that kind of issue came up, we thought of it sort of the same way with other issues of what will people not like about this? What's going to seem creepy? Are people going to wonder, is this a human being or is it a synthesized voice? In this case, everyone seemed to agree, everyone will realize this is not a human because that human, it's not Casey Kasem speaking to millions and millions of people at the same time. So, do we need to worry about making it clear to people that this is a computer? No, probably not, because it's pretty obvious that it's not, as opposed to other use cases where maybe that is the kind of thing that you'd worry about. Are we worried about copyright? No, because all the things that he's talking about are publicly available information that are not protected by copyright. So we're just going through sort of the same traditional legal issues that we'd look at for another product, and it happens that the lens of this is AI.
It's really interesting you say that because I'm often asked about being an AI lawyer, and I've actually never thought of myself in even these past 3 years as an AI lawyer because I honestly don't really understand what it means to be an AI lawyer because AI is everywhere. It'd be like calling yourself an internet lawyer at this point, and I couldn't agree with you more that the questions are still the same questions. It's a different lens, and sure, we're seeing some repeat patterns that we have to work through and that can help us speed up, but I couldn't agree with you more on just do your normal lawyer thing in this different use case.
Yeah, no, I agree as well. I think it's gone from being more experimental to being embedded in everything that we do. So I don't think of it as being an AI lawyer either. I think every single discipline has to be able to lean in and approach it with curiosity and try to really understand what the product is doing and how the different permutations as to things that can go sideways, things that can go well. One of the products that we recently launched is called MoneyBot with Cash App. And this is a product that you can go in and you can ask it for trends and patterns. It could provide you options. And in that sense, for us, it was just going in and playing with the product, understanding where does the data come from, where is the human in the loop, when are decisions made, and that transparency with the customers, that's what builds trust that becomes that competitive advantage in the AI world. If people understand where the data is coming in and the lawyers are working through the privacy issues and the IP issues, that will help ensure that, that we're launching products that are both responsible and reliable and safe.
So that's where we are today. And we just talked about how some of it is largely the same. But do you think that will remain true, especially as the regulatory environment changes around AI? Do you think we can just rely on the same processes we have now?
I mean, absolutely not. I mean, the world is changing so fast, and the regulatory environment is evolving quickly, but not as quickly as technology. The transformation around technology is compounding even quicker. So I think the key is really thinking about adaptable frameworks, figuring out ways that we're able to come up with a framework, but be prepared to pivot if something were to change. Like many areas of law, this is one that could result in a patchwork of laws that becomes much harder to comply with if you've got fragmentation across different states. So coming up with a framework that allows you to pivot, I think, is the most sustainable and durable way to approach things.
Yeah, one of the things I often tell our product teams is that right now our company is moving in a certain direction where there is regulation, but also regulators are moving in a direction of regulating more in that space. And so we're kind of on this head-on collision course. And that can sound scary if you're a lawyer, it sounds scary if you're not a lawyer. But I think that the nice thing is that the direction of the regulation is somewhat predictable. As you said, there can be a patchwork, so it can often be frustrating when you're trying to check the boxes, multiple states, multiple countries. But what I try to do is look at the themes of where is regulation going. And one of the nice things is that regulators are human beings. They are coming up with these ideas because they use products and they have concerns, or they have children and they see their children using the products and they have concerns about how they're using it. So in the same way that AI law is not a new thing, the types of things being regulated are some traditional areas. So privacy, copyright, transparency. These are not new things. And so one of the things that we've tried to do is get ahead of these so that if and when, it's not if, it's when the regulation comes, we've already done a lot of the work to comply with them. So as an example, in the fall, we announced a few, we call them AI-related policies, they are AI-related, about content on our service. So one of them is about impersonation. So we've announced a rule that we do not allow content on our service where someone is vocally impersonating someone else without their permission. That's not really a new AI issue. You can imagine, 40 years ago, you could have a singer singing to sound like someone else. And you probably know some examples, comedians who do that, where you're okay with it because they're not pretending to be someone else. You know who the person is. But if they're impersonating them and if they try to pass themselves off, you might have a problem with that. So what we've decided is whether laws are requiring this or not, we require musicians or anyone speaking to disclose who they actually are to not impersonate someone else. If and when regulations come along that require such disclosures, we'll be fine because we've already put that process in place.
So that's a really interesting example because, and you don't have to tell us, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I imagine that part of that decision wasn't just about future-proofing for regulations that aren't out yet. I imagine part of it is also you having a worldview on what makes sense and what's the right thing to do independent of the law. And I would love to hear from the two of you about how you think about your team's role in responsible AI, going beyond strictly pure legal issues or compliance matters, but into larger ethical questions as well.
I mean, I think often, the general counsel of the company is often sort of the chief ethics person at the company, sometimes with that title, sometimes without, but they are responsible, to the company, to its shareholders for ethical issues. I also think that lawyers, just through the training that you have and the types of exercises that you do, are very good at this kind of teasing out of principles. So in the example that I just gave, you could imagine someone saying, the rule should be that you should not be able to sing and sound like someone else. And then everyone say, yep, that's a great rule, let's do that rule. Then someone's gonna raise their hand and say, hold on, Adam Sandler has released albums where he sounds like Bruce Springsteen, and everyone thinks it's great. So is that a problem, or are we okay with that? And then you say, okay, wait, the rule's not that you can't sound like someone else, it's that you can't sound like someone else and pretend you are actually that person without revealing, no, I'm just someone being funny and sounding like someone else. And that's, right now that's not a legal issue, it's an ethical issue. But I think lawyers are just good at all of these, but what about this, but what about that, and teasing out these rules.
Yeah, I mean, being in the financial space, I think often about consumer protection. And there is such a big overlap between what intuitively you feel is right and what's right under the law. There are places where it definitely diverges, but when I think about it from a legal perspective, I think, like you said, the legal team is also thinking about ethics and the different complexities around compliance and consumer protection for us. And so we're just obsessed with the consumer experience, and we think about the consumer experience end to end. We'll think about it when someone onboards, but also with customer service or disputes or complaints that may come after. And so thinking about it in that realm, we're not just thinking about what's legal, but what will create a good consumer experience, which is oftentimes what's the most ethical thing as well.
So then for legal teams whose companies are just starting out in their generative AI journey, what advice would you give them as they're advising their companies?
I would say adopt an AI mindset and think about problems through that AI lens first. Go to those tools and then just roll up your sleeves and build. Coming from a non-technical background and leading a largely non-technical team, we've given our team the space to invent and learn and build and play with the tools. And so being able to play with the tools helps folks govern them, helps draft those policies, and to understand where the engineers and the designers and the product team folks are thinking and where they'd like to go. And it just fuels that creative collaboration process so that we can help think of different options as we're thinking about what they're looking to achieve. On our team, we've built a number of tools in-house, and some of it is just really playing with the tools. One in particular that comes to mind is we had folks on the product team build a marketing tool they called Marley for marketing legal. And it's essentially a tool where you can go in and say, I'm doing an influencer campaign, or I have this social media post, or I'm looking at this marketing asset. And it walks the person through the different frameworks so that things that are more simple and low level are things that they'll be able to self-service. And then it's education over time, which saves the more complex tasks for the folks that need more time to go through it. So I think that would be my advice is like stay curious, lean in, learn from the tools and build, and that will make you a better lawyer and a better advisor and partner to the business teams.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the use the tool piece. That is the number one thing that will come up in a lot of customer conversations when we're working with legal teams about our own technology, where we will get contract markups back where I or my teammates don't entirely understand where they're coming from. We get on the phone and then we realize that the customer legal team or the partner legal team thinks the technology does something it doesn't, or that it works in a way that it doesn't. And I'm always saying, you want a free seat? We'll get you one, play around with it so you can understand it and then help your company make the right decision. So I love that advice, Chrysty. Kevan, what wise words?
And it's funny, we have a similar tool for reviewing marketing copy, and I think five years ago, maybe even less than that, the way a tool like that would happen is that there's a third-party SaaS system that pitches both of our companies, but that's gonna become less and less of a thing because now you can just build it homegrown yourself quite quickly. So the fact that both of our teams independently created a tool like that, I think is a signal of where things are going. I entirely agree that people need to get their hands dirty using these types of tools. The tool that you yourself are selling, or in your case, the business counterpart, but even just using AI tools in general, because I think there's a fear, and some of it just comes with this word, the word AI, people have fear of it. And then there's also, I find often like a failure of imagination, where non-technical people don't even understand what something could be capable of until they see it or play with it themselves. And so, with any new technology, so including this one, if someone's trying to be a lawyer in this space, they really need to get their hands dirty to understand what they're advising on. And as we sort of started with, that will help them to get ahead of issues so that they're not waiting for someone to come and say, like, hey, here's the thing I'd like to do. What do you think? But rather to proactively say, I see where this is going. You're going to want to do this thing. Here are my thoughts on it. The other piece of advice I'd have is think from first principles, and it's what we said before, of the actual AI issues they're copyright issues, they're privacy issues, they're employment issues, they're types of legal issues that come up in other spaces, and once you get your head out of that state of fear of the buzzwords, then you can actually just in a more methodical way think through the issues.
Well, before our final question, I have a little audience participation question for the audience. How many of you have had to work in a lawyer with your job? Okay. Hands down, how many of you have had a pretty challenging experience with a lawyer in your job? Okay, same number of people.
There are more hands for the second one than the first one somehow.
This is an occupational hazard.
Now, how many of you have had a really positive experience or relationship working with a lawyer in your job? Okay. All right. Feedback for the profession. But with that, my final question to the two of you, what is something that you wish creative teams understood about the legal review process?
I think sometimes we are trying to move as quickly as possible, and we want to make sure that we can give teams the ability to move quickly and confidently. And so we don't want things to be perfect, But we're often thinking about second order and third order effects. And from a legal perspective, it's oftentimes not just looking at what the legal risks are, but thinking about reputational risks, tax risks, security risks, a whole host of different things. And sometimes that does take time because it's just a more complex process, and we're naturally pulling in other stakeholders. But in order to help us see that kind of forest through the trees, if you're able to bring your legal counsel in earlier and tell them what you're looking to accomplish, they can also help you think about the how, which creates more creative collaboration and more pathways. It also gets them more invested and excited about what you're looking to create. So I think that would be my advice, is bring your counsel in early, give them as much context as possible, and then understand that they're looking at a number of different complex issues.
Early and context, got it.
I totally agree. Maybe the only thing I'd add, and this is the thing I tell my own team about working with other teams, is to remember we're all on the same team. We all have the same goal of what we're trying to get to, and each team at a company is coming from a different perspective. But no lawyer's goal is to have something not happen. They want things to happen, and they're trying to figure out the best way to do it.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for the time and for the conversation today.